do you believe in good and evil? I guess is a good way to just kind of start the
Of
conversation.
course, of course.
And why? I guess would be the follow-up
Well,
question.
I believe in God, and I've been a Christian now for 3 years. But before that, I thought I believed in good and evil. Growing up, and even when I was an atheist and agnostic, I believed that people do evil things. But I remember like the day I realized there's so much evil in the world. It was like the day they arrested Epstein, and it was just a beautiful blue day, blue sky. And I just had this thought walking around in the woods on the farm where I was at that is the most heinous, evil stuff to do to children. And on the flip side, I also thought there must be the good to balance out that evil because I see that balance in nature. So that was like the beginning of me being like, it's just that simple. There's good and there's evil, and that is what's operating underneath everything going on in humanity today.
Mm. And what about you, Brandon?
I mean, everybody knows I'm not religious, but I have stated before that I do believe good and evil are things. I don't necessarily believe that they are always, if not ever, tied to religion. But I believe in them only because I have seen both of them with my own eyes.
Mm.
I've seen the darker parts of people and the darker parts of the world, and I've seen the good in people and the good in the world. So it's very easy for me to believe things that can confirm and have seen, and I do believe I have seen both.
Mm. So my opinion is that morality is learned because when you look at cultures in different areas, there's different moral standards.
Sure.
So do you agree with that, at least that morality is something that's learned, or do you think morality is inherent and
I
it is
think,
something that is
well, I think we're all born sinners and we're all born super
mm,
flawed. So I think this isn't actually an evil world, and we have to earn grace. And your surroundings can certainly affect how you are, but there is, I think, an objective morality that's across the entire world. That should be, a baseline for morality in terms of, good and evil, in terms of murder, crime, theft, hurting the innocent, stuff like that.
mhm. I I I have a hard time accepting that humans are not natural
Mm.
because we talk about the natural world and what the world would look like without humans and how humans are perverse. But I see humans as a product of nature. So I I think the way that we view morality, human on human conflict,
Hmm.
I think that that is something that is like new in terms of evolution or like how different species interact with each other or whatever. Because a lion killing a gazelle, I like, do you prescribe morality to that? Like the killing of one
No,
animal.
because I think we are a special, because the way I view it through religion is that we are created by God in His
Mm,
image, and that animals, although that is a survival thing, I don't attach any morality to animals and what they do because it's just that's their animal behavior. Whereas we're on a higher level as humans. So of course, we could talk about defense and the need for survival, which clearly we need as humans, but it's different because then it's like lions aren't serial killers the way other humans who are deranged stalk and hunt and kill other humans. So yeah, that's my take on that.
hmm, interesting. I think lions are just as serial killer as a human is a serial killer.
Sure, but wouldn't you be more inclined to agree that that's more of a survival natural basis? Like, I mean, and I'm not saying we've been, my take is not we've been educated by religion or time, but period, just we have grown intellectually over our evolution over the years, and that is what brings us to that higher level, that higher standard. And the difference between killing something for survival, killing something to eat, and killing something just out of rage or lust or
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
something sinful, as Shane would say. for me, that natural survival instinct is always going to be there. You know, if a mother has to defend her child, she's going to go to whatever lengths she can to either protect the child or end the threat. That's just a natural survivability thing for me. And I feel like that's what all wild animals are, is they are just living on this instinctual level. It's the same reason a deer either runs towards Shane's car or doesn't run towards Shane's car.
Right.
You know, it's a reaction. It's a defensive mechanism. But killing a person in cold blood or in a crime of passion even is you know, either premeditated or right on the spot. And either way, you know the difference in what you're doing unless you are mentally ill.
So is what you're saying that if your view is that we have a product of nature, that we kind of are all operating, us and the animals, on this morality thing? And like, do you know about like the ideas of free will versus determinism? Does this fall into your theory?
I think I know about the ideas, and yeah, go ahead, continue.
Free will would be like, I think that comes from God. We have this ability to choose, make our choices for ourselves. But that's a whole other argument we won't get too much into, just because like you could then talk about how if you believe in God, God then sees every possible path you can take. So kind
And that
of you
also
have
that
free
he's
will.
choosing your path
Right,
for you
like
because he knows which one you should take.
But there's infinite ones, but maybe he doesn't maybe he doesn't make you choose a path, but there's infinite types of paths you could be, and each one of those have been determined. But that's I still just think there's free will. But then determinism is people who think that everything's laid out, there's just one path, and no matter what you do, that was just what you were bound to do. And that some people who believe in determinism even think people who are murderers or child predators shouldn't be treated the same, shouldn't be treated as badly as they are in the society. And that is an extreme view of, I'm not saying all determinists think that, but they think that's just, it's their nature, which is why I asked you that. And they are like, well, they shouldn't be ostracized like from society because that's just their nature, which I disagree with. You know, I think there is something wrong, whether it's a choice they've made or some imbalance or just possession, some evil thing going on. Like that is a genuinely bad thing that needs to be removed from society. And, you know, however you want to interpret that, there's multiple ways of doing that. But that's my take on that. And I also think the difference between us and animals is that we do know what is right, the difference between right and wrong, and that the animals don't need to know that. I mean, you can train animals to do certain things, but like these wild animals, they don't really, I don't think, need to know right versus wrong. They just need to know how to survive, how to feed their family, make it to the next day, and that's that. But yeah, tell me more.
So I think your questions align perfectly with kind of my thought process. And to keep me from confusing myself, I'll just focus on your one question of free will. So when we make decisions, sometimes it's the conscious mind, sometimes it's the non-conscious mind. Those two parts kind of go back and forth in the process of decision making when it comes down to like the very like
Right.
instantaneous, like seconds, like the really small seconds.
hands on the wheel. Yeah.
Right. So because of that, I think that free will exists while you are thinking about your actions. I think it's something you can exercise in a sense. I think you do not exercise free will when you react without thinking. I think you exercise free will when you think before reacting. And that's the idea of reacting based on your history, your perception on the world, your preconceived notions. It's not necessarily free will from God or anything like that. It's free will from your bias.
Right. But thankfully, as humans, we can break that mold of our surroundings and become something else, and recognize that maybe the place we grew up or the people who raised us or the people around us as we grew up were wrong or just not teaching us the right stuff. And, we can change that. Whereas animals, I could probably only change that if humans have entered their habitat and are hunting them and they have to deal with that, or they've been captured and taken to a zoo or something. Whereas, people who grew up in certain neighborhoods that are really bad, they can continue living that way for sure because it's all they know. There's other people who realize like this is not the way people should live, and they change their lives, they move, they've realized right versus wrong, that maybe the way they grew up was promoting a certain lifestyle that was unhealthy. It doesn't have to. We don't have to take religion into this. It just comes down to like, if I keep living this way, I'm going to die, or I'm going to not, never have a family, or never have any success, never start that small business, never own a house, stuff like that. So we have that ability to like change our lives and learn from the mistakes and the bad things that we've had in our history, in our communities.
Hmm. So I think the best way to deal with conflict is to focus on human needs, because I think all human needs are universal.
Like the basic
So
ones, right?
when we look at a serial killer, you can look at the beginning of their life when they're born to the point where we find out whatever information we have about them. And I think the behavior that they normalize is learned. That's not for someone that is like actually a sociopath. I'm saying like for most people that think that like murder is okay. For example, I think behavior is learned, and that goes from the beginning of birth.
But with the serial killers, like, who is someone teaching them that, or is that just something that they're born with?
Well, I
that
don't.
they think?
I would probably agree in a sense of I don't know that you can be born with hereditary traits or instinctual traits to want to murder out of liking it or being demented. I kind of get where you're going with this. It seems like it's something that evolved in that person's mind over time, not something that they were born with,
I think it's different. I don't think you could say it all for all of them, because there are some serial killers who were from a young age. Like we talked about Ed Kemper, he murdered really young, and had fantasies very young. And there's other people who had, as far as we know, no inclinations to fantasies, at least outwardly, or even in hidden diaries. And something happened later on, we don't know what, or some chemical imbalance. But I think it's different for a lot of them, because they're all similar in many ways, but different, different in many ways.
Because you've got all these different examples. You've got Ed Gein,
Ed Gein,
Jeffrey Dahmer, Crimes of Passion.
Yep.
He was physically in love with these humans.
Yep.
And then you've got Charles Manson, who did this out of religion. Now you can argue that his cultist following were taught that this was acceptable, that this was okay. And you've even heard the interviews where they said that they were doing it for God. They would do anything for God. Sadie, I think her name was, she really believed that it wasn't a crime to murder these people as long as she was doing it out of love.
Well, yeah, they were so indoctrinated
Absolutely.
and hypnotized by Manson, who, if you've read Chaos, was hypnotized by the CIA and was totally MK Ultra'd and taught to do those things that they did to him, to this cult, and he was being monitored. And that whole other tangent we don't have to get into, but he was certainly put them under a spell, and he didn't do the killing. He sent them in to do it. He might have done others, because there was the La Bianca house as well, but. Yeah, they're all so different. We talked about Herbert Mullen yesterday, who he was schizophrenic. In his schizophrenia, it tweaked it so where he thought he had to save the world, or save California rather, by killing people to alleviate the weight of people, so the state wouldn't sink into the ocean.
I do think mental disability and delusion do play a big factor in a lot of these things. That for me is one common denominator that I can find with a lot of these things.
Yeah, it could be like what the parents were doing,
Yeah,
when the mom
the way
was
that they were
pregnant,
treated when they were raised,
how they
something
were
that happened to
treated.
them when they were kids, whether they were bullied in high school, last pick for kickball. I mean, you name it. And yes, it is an Alkaline Trio song. That's totally correct. Great song. They're from Chicago. I love them. Thank you for calling that out.
Yeah, good shot.
Awesome. So I think the argument can be made for both, man. It's a very, very interesting topic, because, it really does seem like it can be, just a complete mental disability thing, or in certain senses of religion and things like that, and crimes of passion and stuff like that, that can be learned inherently, even based off of just experiences that I've had. I don't believe that a person is born with a natural instinct to want to mass murder.
So let's bring it back to the beginning then, and maybe expand on it just a bit more. Do you not then believe in good and evil at all, or like how does that work in your theory?
So I do not believe in good and evil.
Okay.
I believe people act in a way that they think will provide them the best results. And I think a lot of times they're incorrect, and the results actually are counterintuitive. They produce the opposite results from what they want. However, that's the strategy that they've learned to deal with that situation. So that's their go-to. And I think that's why people repeat self-deprecating behaviors. And I want to clarify, what I'm saying is not to justify behavior or to say that people who harm other people are not harming other people. What I'm saying is that a person is not good or bad. Actions they take could be good or bad. And there's a difference in the way we speak when we're talking about a person versus their actions.
Yeah, I mean, in some instances for sure, and I can see what you're saying, but I like, how do you then, if I'm interpreting this theory correctly, you're basically saying that everyone's morality, which is, there might not be any in this theory, but everyone's decision making is so subjective that even the things that might appear evil to someone like me is an objective decision they made that has a bad outcome, but in their mind was meant to just get them to the next whatever the goal they needed. So it kind of like, correct me if I'm wrong, that bad and good decision making sterilizes the stuff. You know, the harm. I know what you're saying. Like, you're not saying harming is bad, but doesn't it sort of sterilize the crimes that might happen when these people who think they're not doing bad things do bad things?
So I hear what you're saying. um, hmm.
And then, like, is there?
I think a good way to
Yeah, sorry, keep going.
give me an example of something evil, obviously evil, that everybody would agree with. And I'm not going to defend something evil. I'm going to explain what I'm talking about.
Abducting a child and killing it.
Okay. So what I'm talking about is somebody who abducts a child and kills it. They have an unmet need. And the way that they are meeting that need is by abducting a child and killing it.
But that
obviously
need is
that
evil.
strategy is wrong, and I think that's wrong. What I'm saying is that I believe there are other strategies that person would be okay with that can meet the same need.
Like what?
Well, it depends on what the need is, and that's really hard to identify, and kind of goes into, like, it's something that I struggle with, which is identifying the language around needs.